This is a newspaper clipping stating "Votes for Women is Success," with the United States map in the middle and on either side, states saying suffrage granted, or suffrage was granted. This is a newspaper clipping talking about the 19th Amendment, the amendment that allowed women to vote alongside men. Women ruled the suffrage movement and pushed for legislation of the amendment. However, when we think about the people that were in government at the time, the senators, those in the House of Representatives, and governors, all of them were men. There was only one woman in the House of Representatives elected in 1917. So, as men were in political power at the time, they made the final decision to approve the amendment. Both men and women were involved in the first major push for gender equality. If feminism is to be discussed, it must be fully understood. You can't form a full opinion on something if you don't know that thing. You can't talk about your favorite rap song or your favorite hip hop song if you don't listen to rap or hip hop. Feminism is defined as the belief in social, political, and economic equality between the sexes, as said by Salem Press Encyclopedia. Let's break apart the definition a little bit to fully understand it. Both of the sexes, men and women, should be equal socially and within social issues. Both men and women should be treated equally politically and within political ideals. And women and men should be treated equally economically. We still have work to do in all of these different categories, especially economically, where, for example, women earn substantially less than men in the job market. However, we're all advancing towards equality. To continue the conversation of equality, two key words should be fully understood. Both of these words are very similar, in fact, for the exception of one word, and both are crucial to understand to promote equality. Misogyny is defined as the dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against women, as said by Oxford Dictionary. Misandry, which is similar for the one word, is dislike of, contempt for, or ingrained prejudice against men or the male sex, as said by Oxford Dictionary. Misandry describes a feeling of ingrained hatred that women can face, however, men can face it too. And as both of these words are defined, both are seen in today's society. More people know the word misandry or misogyny more than they do misandry. I'm part of many Facebook groups revolving around making and answering polls. Individuals in these groups are aged 18 years and older and are both men and women. I asked two different questions here for them. I asked, do you know the definition of misogyny and do you know the definition of misandry? 53 individuals, or 93% of polled, said they know the definition of misogyny, and 4 individuals, or 7% of those polled, said they know the definition of misandry, or misogyny. 46 individuals, or 81% of those polled, said they know the definition of misandry, versus 11 individuals, or 19% of those polled, said they do not know the definition of misandry. Though I realized that more people would probably know the word misogyny than misandry, I didn't realize that the percentages would be so close. It's a comforting fact that they are so close and the majority know both of the words. However, there's still a discrepancy, and it is important to understand both words so there doesn't become a patriarchy or a matriarchy and rather equality. Ed was a 37-year-old divorced man with one child. His parents immigrated to the US from Canada and were conservative and traditional, to say the least. His father was very dominating, abusive, and condemned Ed for showing emotion and any vulnerability. His mother was also submissive and accommodating to Ed and her husband. Ed dealt with his father's anger in negative ways by cutting out emotion, dissociating, and controlling others, similar to how his father did. He also denied vulnerability and was defensive like his father. He also disconnected from relationships, which hurt his marriage in the end. Ed reproduced some of this behavior in his own marriage and would mask the pain and emotion of his past. And when problems arose in his marriage, he blamed Allison, which ended up badly. Vulnerability and embracing conflict can be hard for men sometimes. As said by Peter Cornish, vulnerability and embracing conflict is essential for relationships. Individuals should attack conflict head on to come to a common solution. Men tend to feel more comfortable avoiding conflict, however, which can cause distraction and disconnection in relationships. As said by Arth Levant, men are taught to avoid conflict and to keep emotions private. Men are also expected to be dominant often and avoid emotions, which can hurt relationships as well. Ed and his father were dominant against their wives and were abusive, which ended up in negative relationships between them. As Ed and his father, males should make sure to be positive influences on the younger generation. If Ed's father wasn't as dominating or accepted emotion, maybe Ed would have turned out differently. The next question I asked was, do you think men experience gender discrimination? And 26 individuals, or 72% of those polled, said that men do experience gender discrimination. 8 individuals, or 22% of those polled, said that they do not experience gender discrimination, or didn't decide yes or no. And 6% of individuals, or 2 people, said they definitely do not experience gender discrimination. The majority see male discrimination, though not all see it. Any indecisiveness should be explored too, as reasoning was not given for a not yes or not no answer. Some people don't believe men experience gender discrimination at all, but we should explore why. Why were these individuals, though, that didn't say yes and didn't say no, indecisive? Maybe they believe that male discrimination is not as publicized. Maybe it's not as seen as severe as female discrimination. However, they may or may not still deny discrimination. Ed and Allison's story shows that men are treated by male stereotypes in some ways. Those that said yes didn't say the reasoning either necessarily, but they acknowledged the existence of that discrimination. As quoted by a study in Nursing Education Today, implicit gender discrimination in nursing education can affect how female and male students are graded on short answer and essay exams. In this study, there were 8 instructors and 400 exams involved. Both male and female students were graded on an exam, and there is clear bias against male students. These 2 exams, the same exam, was graded twice. Once it was graded, and then 2 months later it was graded again. The first time it was graded, gender was known of those that took it, and in the second time around, gender was not known. The first time, when gender was known, male students tended to score lower than female students who tended to score higher. And in the second time they were graded, men tended to score higher and female students tended to score lower. Men are inherently discriminated against then as they enter the nursing field and in class, which can discourage men from entering the field. Men can experience discrimination too and be negative. You might be thinking, why is a woman speaking on this? Why is a 19-year-old female tackling a controversial topic that revolves around men's feelings? Well, I turned 18 in a very important year, not because of COVID or murder hornets or any of that. I turned 18 in an important year because I was able to vote in a very controversial election. I was able to vote and promote my political ideals and my political side. Once I started to research what I might believe in, I realized and sympathized with those that didn't know the definition of feminism exactly. They might have been confused, just didn't know the definition, or uncomfortable. As I talked to individuals about this topic, I realized that men sometimes don't like to share their thoughts and views on feminism. And as I've talked about it with my male friend and partner, I've learned that they feel excluded. Again, I've asked many male figures about their views on the topic, and I immediately asked my partner about the topic as well. He said that he felt uncomfortable by the movement and felt not included most of the time. He was worried he would be mansplaining anything about the topic because he didn't want to seem illogical. The majority of individuals want men in the conversation, as we'll see later on, but men still feel isolated from the conversation. He didn't say his stance until I said mine, which was a major thing for me. He has a right to his opinion, of course, but he worries that feminists would disagree with him because of his opinion and because of his male voice and because his opinion is different from theirs. When I asked for a specific example, he said in Cornell University, there is one diversity class that everybody had to take. Most of these classes revolved around gender, and as he quotes, "I didn't want to take those because I felt as a man, my opinion wouldn't be considered in class discussion." His feelings then defeat the whole point of the class. If there are no other feelings or opinions involved in the class, then people can't understand other sides of the story and shoot for equality. The next question I asked was, if you're a male, do you feel comfortable talking about feminism? And if so, do you feel comfortable talking about feminism with women? When I asked, do you feel comfortable talking about feminism in general, 16 individuals, or 89% of those polled, said that they do feel comfortable. However, 2 individuals, or 11% of those polled, said they do not feel comfortable. The next question, if so, do you feel comfortable talking about feminism with women? 17 individuals, or 94% of those, said yes, and 1 individual, or 6% of those polled, said they do not. Though the sample sizes are significantly smaller than these last polls, men still tend to feel more comfortable talking about feminism, which is a great fact. However, these percentages should be 100% for men that feel comfortable. There are still some men out there that don't feel comfortable around the topic, and we need everybody involved to make sure quality and equality can rise. The personal experiences I've had and those that I've heard tend to go against these polls, which is why we should talk about it. Again, everybody should be involved in the movement. Men helped pass the 19th Amendment, so they were inherently part of the conversation of gender equality. Men made change here for women, so having them part of feminism was crucial, even though it wasn't called feminism back then. Now, the question is, should men be involved now? Should men hold an opinion on the topic of feminism, share their opinion, and be part of the fight towards gender equality? My goal here is not to make everybody a feminist. Feminism should be explored for its root goal of creating equality for both men and women. As I do not expect everybody here to become a feminist, the opposing side should definitely be explored. If individuals do not feel welcome within the movement or hold a misrepresentation of the movement, then change cannot simply be made. My final question I asked was, do you think men should be involved in the feminist movement? 71 individuals, or 95% of those polled, said that they should be. 1 individual, or 1% of those polled, said no. And 3 individuals, or 4%, did not decide between yes or no. It's important to know that men can hold a position that supports women and themselves towards equality. As many people want men in the conversation, we should involve them in the conversation. You can't just say that I want somebody involved in something if you don't actively try to involve them. However, it's important to understand too that some men might not want to state their support for feminism or do not feel comfortable talking about feminism or being involved. The past poll determining if men felt comfortable talking about feminism show that men tend to feel comfortable on the topic. This is wonderful. However, again, that percentage should be 100%. Some men still feel resentment against feminists. As recorded by Renee F. Procopio and Laura R. Ramsey, feminists have been characterized as ugly, man-hating lesbians in search of reverse discrimination. And that's a real quote from an academic source. Though this quote is far from the majority of supporters, men feel attacked sometimes because they feel that women want to take away their dominance. Men are pushed to be dominant and women are submissive, as seen in those conservative and traditional roles. And some men have established that dominance of lack of vulnerability, which is pushed by negative male stereotypes. If men that do not originally support the movement can be explained why the feminist movement supports equality rather than reverse discrimination, as said in the quote, men will be more apt to get on board. Now, Ed's story was not done, if you can remember Ed. Ed and Allison ended up getting divorced because of the problems in their marriage. And when they got divorced, they still had the one child, and Allison ended up with full custody of that child. Ed was very upset, needless to say. As said by Peter Cornish, he put considerable pressure on Allison to get shared custody, which ended up happening. Ed was deeply frustrated, however, with the original full custody agreement and the divorce that Allison prompted, which pushed him to anti feminist movements. He wanted to bring attention to the male race and connect with those that were angry at their ex wives. However, as Ed realized that this rage and revenge had negative consequences and wasn't necessarily doing what he wanted it to do, he sought therapy and ended up joining pro feminist movements. As stated by Michael Salter, Australians' men's rights and activism groups have held protests and shared their frustrations with the feminist movement. They've expressed both their concerns of violence and social issues set against men. Those in men's rights and activism groups feel their rights have been overshadowed because of the discrimination highlighted on women. Though men are affected by negative gender stereotypes and expectations, some men feel their struggles have been forgotten, even. And to involvement in that conversation, their concerns and fears must be understood, which will make them feel heard within the movement. Having men in the conversation will allow equality to advance. Without withholding them from the conversation can promote frustration, anger, and isolation, which can cause negative emotions toward the feminist movement, which is not what we want, and can have a rise of anti feminist movements. This is seen within the Ed and Allison story, where Ed felt his dominance diminish when his wife gained full custody and divorced him, which caused him to join anti feminist movements. Men need to be included for change to occur, which begins as early as approving the 19th Amendment. Men can be part of the conversation of feminism where men understand the struggles that women still have with gaining gender equality. Men can be more open to understanding the struggles that women still hold with equality, while women can do their part too. They can work to educate men that don't understand the movement or uncomfortable by the movement and can understand where their perspectives arise. As said in the United States Constitution in 1789, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or of any state on the account of sex. Though the women's fight for equality did not rocket immediately after this amendment, the amendment was a massive step in the right direction. One of the most fundamental activities in political participation was voting, and women are only just able to vote thanks to this amendment. As we remember the amendment and all of the push towards equality for both genders, we must remember who got us there. Women took a massive role in leading the feminist movement and suffrage movement and pushing for that legislation. However, men were in political power in 1920 and officially led the ratification of the 19th Amendment. Men must not be forgotten then. Understanding the attitudes of men towards feminism and including them in the movement is what propelled this first major step towards equality in the first place. Having them included now will only advance the movement towards equality for both sexes, which is how feminism is officially defined. Thank you.